welcome to today's Times Journeys webinar, Iran, Tales from Persia. My name's Victoria Hanson and I'm the Programme Manager here at the New York Times for Times Journeys. Since announcing this webinar last week, I've been completely inundated with emails from people really excited to hear more about Iran, to hear more directly from Elaine Sciolino, who's our expert that accompanies some of our departures, and to ask the questions that they've always had about this, what can be quite a divisive country, divisive even. Now, during the next 45 minutes, I'll walk you through the itinerary on a day-by-day basis, talking about some of our highlights, and then hand it over to Elaine, who's going to be able to share some of her stories and elaborate a little bit more on the lectures that she'll be talking about whilst on the road with you, we hope. But first and foremost, why travel with the New York Times? Well, on every single one of our 45 plus departures, 45 plus itineraries, you'll be accompanied with a time-selected expert or journalist just like Elaine. We run a programme of small group tours and cruises. Each of our small group tours is limited to no more than 28 guests. And our cruises take place on world-renowned cruise lines like Cunard or Holland and America. We visit locations as diverse as Cuba, Provence and Myanmar, destinations that are quite often quintessential or bucket list destinations, as well as classic ones of Provence and Italy. We offer exclusive access, so you can escape the crowds during pre-hours trips to some of the museums we might visit on some of our trips, for example in Russia, or also by getting you the best seats in the house for some of our operatic tours. Now here's a quick overview of our itinerary itself. So this is a 13-day trip, and as Elaine knows, you start off in Tehran. You're going to be visiting Kermanshah, Borouger, and we've just got a little technical issue there. I'm going to turn on the camera. I think now we might be live and everybody can see us. So let's start again. Welcome.
Thank you.
So day one, we're going to be going to Tehran. Then we're going to Kermanshah, Borouger, across the Zagros Mountains, into Arghigugad and Isfahan, before making our way to Yazd and Shiraz, where we get to explore Persepolis, and then heading back to Tehran 13 days later. Now, included on your trip is all of your accommodation, of course, a tour manager and local guides, your transfers, and the majority of your meals. Some of the highlights, you'll hear more about these later on, but some of the highlights include the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Persepolis and Pasargadae, the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Isfahan and its incredible architecture, including the Vant Cathedral and the First Lady's Mosque, the Sheikh Lotfullah. Is that how you pronounce it?
You're doing great.
I'm sure Elaine's going to correct me on a number of things.
No, keep going. You're good. I want to be you.
And we're also going to be going to Shiraz, which is the former Iranian capital during the 18th century. Now over to Elaine. Now, as I mentioned, she accompanies our December tour. We have a number of departures with Elaine, but they've all sold out. So this is going to be your last opportunity to travel with Elaine in 2016. She's written for the New York Times for a number of years, holding a number of positions, from the Paris bureau chief to chief diplomatic correspondent as well. And she now writes from her home in France about not only travel, but life in Paris, and has recently authored a brand new book as well, a book that's literally just been published, The Only Street in Paris, Life on the Rue de Marty. So Elaine Sciolino has travelled extensively throughout the Middle East and Europe, and in fact has lost count of the number of times that she's been to Iran. She's interviewed many Iranian leaders, including the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini as well. She's been awarded the Legion of Honour by France and is the author of the award-winning book Persian Mirrors. And she's been based in France since 2002. So we're actually delighted that she's left Paris to come back to the New York Times and to be here live today for our webinar. So welcome, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Tori. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to be at the New York Times. As Tori said, exceptionally, I'm in New York because my very latest book, The Only Street in Paris, is just being published now. It's a very different kind of journey from the one I'm going to talk about. It's my journey and my encounter and my wild, passionate, never-ending love affair with one Paris street. So it digs down really deep into a very small world, a half a mile long street of magic, and my finding home there. Iran is a very different kind of journey. In a way, I kind of found home in Iran because the first time I went to Iran was with Ayatollah Khomeini on his chartered plane from Paris as he was going to Iran to make his revolution. And I left with a little Adidas hand luggage bag to go for 3 days, and I stayed for 2 months. And it's that kind of encounter, my encounter with Iran as someone who was not a Middle Eastern or an Iranian expert or an expert on Islam, that I like to convey to our clients, our guests, our friends, as we do these times journeys. And one of the things that's very important to say right off is that Iran is a safe place for American travel. And the fact that the New York Times has put its stamp of approval on these trips means that we as an institution believe that Iran is a good place of discovery and adventure for any American. On this trip in December, for example, my 25-year-old daughter is going to be joining me. I have to share my room with her, and this may be a good thing or bad thing, but we're going to see. It's going to be a new kind of mother-daughter bonding on the road. But it's safe for if it's safe for her, it's safe for me, and it's safe for you. The other thing that is so extraordinary about Iran and these journeys is that they're very different from other kinds of trips to Iran, which are now being organized. These trips are expensive, but exceptionally, there are not one, but two knowledgeable guides with us. They each has had 25 years experience as a guide. And one, Hadi, is kind of the storyteller, and Sirus is kind of the intellectual sociologist. And they usually only do one person on these tours, but they are taking exceptionally these trips so seriously that there's two of them on these tours. And then you have me as a sort of outside expert. I'm kind of the storyteller, and I'm the one who leads what I call a 2-week-long cocktail party without the alcohol.
That's a brilliant phrase. Well, and let's just dive straight into that cocktail party. So from Paris, we touched down in Tehran. So Elaine, tell us, what was your first memory when you went to Tehran for the very first time?
How am I going to get through a sea of 1 million people waiting with Ayatollah Khomeini in the airport to the Intercontinental Hotel, where we stay now? It's got a different name, but we will be at the hotel that all the journalists stayed in during the revolution. And I think they still have the same dishes on the room service menu. But it's a very welcoming place. They're used to foreigners. And Tehran is a very difficult city to penetrate. It's built up. It can be polluted because it sits at the base of this wonderful Zagros Mountains, and you can see from this picture that there are mountains there. And with our trip, we try to penetrate some of these spaces. For example, we go and visit the crown jewels. I mean, here Iran had a revolution against the monarchy, but someone very smart locked up all the crown jewels in the central bank, and so we still have all of the jewels of the kingdom there. We visit the Carpet Museum, which is just extraordinary for anyone who is interested in any kind of textile, and the Shah's palaces, which again were saved by the revolutionaries. They were not destroyed, as happened with so many places in the country that I live in, France.
Yes, and we're very lucky that they've been able to preserve everything for our guests or friends, as Elaine said. I like that a lot. And so after Tehran, we're just going to talk through some of the different places. The remains of the Anahita Temple, exactly as Elaine mentioned there, we've got these spectacular destinations that that our guests and our friends can visit in Borough. Also the Falak al Aflak in Karamabad, which I believe is dating back to
1800-year-old castle, for anybody who likes castles.
And we travel across we've gone a bit farther.
We've gone backwards.
And we travel across the Zagros. We've lost control of the mouse, everybody, apologies. We travel across the Zagros Mountains as well.
Yeah, and this is really a unique voyage because many of the tourists to Iran do not take this westerly route, and we've decided to give our friends, as we call them, a completely different Iran. So we spend a lot of time looking at these extraordinary landscapes and head west rather than just straight south. I mean, on our last trip to Iran, we saw rice paddies with the most extraordinary expansive green because the rice plants were just starting to grow.
That's incredible, and I'm sure that very few people know that Iran has rice and rice paddies. And I think it's actually during our crossing of the Zagros Mountains as well that you get to go and visit the residence of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini.
Yes, Ayatollah Khomeini came from. It was born in a little town called Khomeini, and the last time we went, the director of the complex, who is a cleric, sat with us and talked to us for about 45 minutes, and this was really unusual. And the Americans were just fascinated with having this one-on-one encounter and being able to ask him questions. And so I asked a question about the nuclear accord, and I said, so if Ayatollah Khomeini were alive today, would he have approved the nuclear accord? And I expected this kind of like tortuous, wishy-washy, blah, blah. And he said, Hatman, absolutely he would have approved it. So this is the kind of encounter that makes this kind of trip worthwhile.
Well, exactly. I mean, we can't promise it on every single one of our tours.
But it'll be something different.
Exactly. We will find something equally amazing. And then Elaine can talk about that on our next webinar. Isfahan. Well,
Isfahan. My book that Tori mentioned on Iran called Persian Mirrors, which is a sort of journey of my 20 years. At that point, 20 years travels through Iran. Has a cover from this palace in Isfahan, and it's you really put yourself into the 17th century when you enter here. It's an old mansion which just again transports you to a world of adventure and beauty that we really don't know about,
especially as an outsider. But hopefully, once you go to Iran, you'll no longer be an outsider, and you'll be meeting all sorts of magical people in the country. This, I think, is an iconic picture. If you Google Iran and you look at the images, it's always this mosque that comes up.
Well, this great turquoise blue everywhere. You even in the smallest towns, you'll see tiny little mosques with extraordinary tile work with this incredible blue that is unique to Iran.
Mm-hmm. And then Pasargadi, another UNESCO World Heritage Site. I feel like we're just constantly saying UNESCO, but that's how important Iran is for all of this heritage.
Yeah, there were people on our trip who basically said we need to see these 5th century BC sites before we die, and this is the time to go because we arrive at these sites. The last trip I took, it was in the summer, and it was hot, and so we arrived very, very early in the morning, and we're there as soon as it opened, and we had the place to ourselves.
Wow. And
you're starting to see tourists from a lot of different countries creep in, but in this year at this time, it's a great time for Americans to go because we own the sites.
Yes, we're very lucky. And then for 2016, our guests are going to be lucky to go to Shiraz.
Well, we went to Shiraz.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we went to Shiraz. We've gone to Shiraz. You can't go to Iran without going to Shiraz.
Oh, it was Yazd.
Yes, it was Yazd. But I think we maybe will spend more time in that region. So you're right in that sense that we'll be in the region of Shiraz. We'll be spending in Isfahan. We'll be spending more time. Again, Shiraz is my favorite city because it's the city of moderation. And it's a city of nightingales and gardens with beautiful roses and extraordinary old homes like this that has a beautiful, beautiful garden.
And taking a stroll through the gardens is I'm sure, one of the highlights there.
Another wonderful citadel.
Yes, and more fantastic architecture. And as Elaine alluded to a little bit, we have these conversations and lectures and seminars on our trips, and there are so many hot topics about Iran, and these are just the 5 that we could whittle it down to on this trip. So maybe, Elaine, if you could speak to, just give people a little taster of each of these, let's start off with the revolution.
Oh, well, Tori says 5, but we have a lot of time to kill on the bus, so it ends up being more like 10. But what I do on these trips is I sort of pick a topic and then talk for a while, and then we have lots of questions and answers. And then people who have a particular area of expertise, I ask them to kind of pipe up and even join the conversation. Mm-hmm. So it is not Scheherazade with 1001 Nights telling stories as much as it's the Canterbury Tales, where all the travelers contribute something, and that means that we all have fun and we're all invested. And I'm a journalist, so I ask everybody questions too. But in terms of what I try to do is I give a little bit of the historical background of the revolution. What is the revolution? How did it happen? Why did it happen? A little of the flavor of the excitement, but also the danger of the early years and the unknown. How did Ayatollah Khomeini create an Islamic Republic, which has lasted since 1979? I also talk about the tortuous history between of the United States-Iranian relations, and
yes.
And I ask our guests, so who of you have seen the movie Argo? And just about everyone raises his or her hand, and I say, well, I lived Argo. The day that the American embassy in Tehran was taken, I happened to have a visa to Iran in my passport. I called up my editors. I said, should I go? This crisis may be over by tomorrow. And they said, yes, you should go. And then it lasted for 444 days. But I have pictures of myself outside the American embassy with everybody screaming death to America. And I'm in my safari jacket and sunglasses and no headscarf, because in those days it had not been headscarfized. It had headscarfized. Good. I talk about the status of women and how women in Iran are steel magnolias. They're not shrinking violets. Women in Iran, unlike women in a place like Saudi Arabia, can vote, they can drive, they can hold public office. There are women in parliament. And it's important for Americans to know that they are full partners in the society, including the fact that 60% of university students today are women.
Wow.
And that has caused extraordinary challenges for the society as young men feel left out.
And that isn't something that I think a lot of outsiders know. It's almost like, oh, we'll go to Iran. Oh, but what about visiting as a woman, and how will it impact me? And will I be disturbed by what I see for my other women on the ground there? And that isn't the case.
Well, the only little glitch, the only little problem is that women, even American women, even non-Muslims, technically we have to cover our hair. There's a line in the Quran about say to believing women that you will cover your ornaments. And I've had all these arguments with clerics saying, I'm not a believing woman. I'm a Catholic. So why do I have to cover my ornaments, which is your hair? Anybody who's coming on one of these trips, I'll tell you what kind of scarf to bring. Don't bring one of those wonderful silk Hermes scarves. It's going to slip over your head. Bring this little gauzy that you can kind of wrap around. On the road, you can get away with, a hat with a wide brim, as long as you're not flaunting the rest of your ornaments and your clothes. And, a man's shirt and a pair of black pants and a hat with a broad brim will be just fine in places like Persepolis. The women are playing this kind of cat and mouse game with the government about how much hair to show, how much to get away with. In one of the hotels, I actually saw a woman with no headscarf and a mini skirt and high heels, but she was like running from one corridor to another. So it's kind of like, Tom and Jerry, that cartoon that, you play with it. We don't play with it too much because we don't want to get our guides into trouble. We don't want to put them out of business. Mm-hmm. So we follow the rules up to a point. But we have a good time. And at least once your headscarf will fall into your soup.
And I think that touches nicely upon the lecture that you deliver about the rules as well, and how they're constantly evolving, and how people are trying to come up with ways to work around them as well. And then finally, at the moment, you can't talk about Iran without talking about the nuclear program as well. And who knows what's going to have come up by the time we go to Iran with you in December 2016. It's going to be a whole other lecture topic then.
Yes, and the nuclear, I've covered Iran's nuclear program for, 25 years at least. I mean, in 1995, I was the first American to go to the Russian-built nuclear site in Bushehr at the Persian Gulf. So is that 30 years? It's 20. 95, that's 20. And, covered more of those nuclear talks than I care to remember, even having to spend some Thanksgivings in Vienna for the nuclear talks. The nuclear deal has transformed the landscape in Iran. Everyone on the street you talk to is in favor of it. For one thing, finally, it's basically the United States saying to Iran, you are a country worthy of an arms control agreement. Is it a perfect arms control agreement? It's not perfect, but it's no worse than the START II agreement between the United States and the Russians.
That's good. So now we've obviously been asking, I've been asking Elaine questions, and we've been sent some questions in previously, and obviously when people ring up our call centre, they're always asking questions as well. So this is our question time. So I'm going to hand it over to our viewers, our listeners, our readers, our friends, and you can all write your questions in the little box on the right-hand side of the screen now. Before we open that up, though, I'm just going to go through some of our frequently asked questions, because I think 90% of you will want to know a little bit about this. So first and foremost, do we include international airfare in the prices for our trips? And the simple answer is no, we don't. And the reason being is that the majority of people, when booking their flights, they always want to use their air miles, and this just gives you the flexibility to do that. The visa question is a big question. It comes up all the time, and we will process, our tour operator, Mountain Travel Sobek, who operate this trip on our behalf, they submit the visas for us. It's a stepped process whereby you're going to be submitting a scanned copy of your a copy of your passport, a copy of the completed Iranian visa application, even your resume, and then later on you will need to submit your physical passport in order to get the stamp for it as well. And the whole process can take about 6 to 8 weeks. I think we've already touched upon, whether it's safe to travel to Iran, and we just would not be, as the New York Times, promoting a trip to a country that we did not feel was safe for our readers. We're not going to be putting our readers or sending our readers anywhere that we didn't feel was safe. And in fact, as Elaine said, people are very inquisitive, and they want to find out much more about these funny Americans and British and other nationalities, and that the people that are visiting their country. And we've touched upon the dress code as well. So what I'm going to do is open up our little panel here. Now we've got a few questions. So let's just see what they say. Looking a little small there. So this question is, I understand that citizens from the US, Canada and the UK cannot be on the streets without a guide, meaning if there's any leisure time, we cannot leave without being accompanied by a guide. Is this true?
Any American who wants to go to Iran has to be accompanied by a tour guide. It's just the way it is. We're lucky because the guys we have, are not watched by the government. There's no listening device in the bus. And they are so extraordinarily open and honest about both the pluses and the minuses of life in Iran that it's been an enriching experience for me.
Fantastic. and I'm sure for our guests as well. So we've got a question here about how strenuous the trip is. Obviously, there's a lot of moving around, whether it's on by flying or on the buses, and also just exploring the different sites when
Yes.
we're on the ground.
Yeah, it's not that strenuous, and you are in a bus. But I have to tell you, if you have arthritic knees, and this sounds ridiculous, but there are a lot of places on the road where the only option in terms of a pit stop is a squat toilet. And you better do some practicing, with squats, or bring along. I always bring a collapsible cane, and I usually lend it to somebody who doesn't realize that he or she really needs a cane to go up and down these incredibly high stones. Make sure you have the best walking shoes in the world, because we do visit a lot of ancient sites. But if you think you need a cane, bring it. Bring one of these wonderful collapsible ones. Just put it in your handbag or your carry-all, put it on the bus, and take it out if you think you need it. Our last trip, we had a woman who was 86. She was with her daughter, and her daughter was her cane for 2 weeks. Another woman was 80. She really did need a cane, but we had lovely people on the trip who took her along and helped her. But you don't want to feel like handicapped because you weren't prepared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think preparation is key for this.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that in your pre-departure letter, you include things like you're only going to get instant coffee on the road.
So this is a big deal. This is a big deal. This wasn't asked, but if you need coffee, don't expect you're going to have wonderful brewed coffee all along the way. Iran is a tea drinking culture. There are some wonderful coffee houses, but buy one of those wonderful Bodum or whatever they are coffee makers where you have the French press and you can make it in your hotel room yourself, and bring a pound of coffee and your own little 1 cup coffee maker.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks without alcohol is one thing, but 2 weeks without decent coffee, that can be something different.
Well, you'll get some coffee. It's just that you won't get it every day, and you want to just be if you need caffeine, you got to take care of yourself.
Exactly, I couldn't agree more. So we've got a question here about the quality of the internet and cell phone service in Iran.
The internet is fine. You can get the internet at every hotel we go to. You'll get the internet. So you'll have internet at least once a day. That's not a problem. And cell phone, I always get an Iranian cell phone. I realized this last time I was there, my French cell phone worked in Iran. I would check with your cell phone provider, and you should be able to find that out.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Although I think it's worth mentioning about the internet as well, that just talking a little bit about visas, and our guests are on general tourist visas. We're not on journalistic visas for obvious reasons. And it's social media and broadcasting your thoughts and your commentaries is not something that you should be doing whilst you're on this trip. It's something that we need to it's just being respectful of the rules from the Iranian government. So by all means, use the internet whilst you're there, but just be mindful of social media usage.
Well, I think if I could add to amplify your thought, certainly use the internet to write home. I've had this extraordinary time. This has been wonderful, blah, blah, blah. The food at this hotel was really, not the best, but then we went and did this, da, da, da. Is it possible that at certain places, you could be monitored? Iran is like the United States. You're a foreigner in a country. We don't have, if you're an Iranian in America or you're an American in Iran, you're going to be listened to. You're going to be watched. That's all there is to it. I am sure my cell phones in France have been tapped since the moment I arrived, because I write about terrorism and politics. And so you just have to be aware. You don't want to be doing something like, if you get invited into someone's home and there are Iranian women dancing without their headscarves, you don't want to take a little video and transmit it back home, not because of your safety, but because you don't want to get these women into trouble. You don't want to get the guides into trouble. So use your better judgment, but certainly feel free to write letters back home about your experiences, and to assure your loved ones that you are safe and and
what a
well
fantastic
fed.
time you're
Yeah, what a
having.
great time you're having. Exactly.
And so we've had a question now about, this is the real basics. It's about credit cards and cash and paying for things. So can you use credit cards whilst
No,
you're
you
there?
can't. You can't use American credit cards. Just bring cash. If you think you want to, buy something, bring cash dollars, and bring 100. This is a scream. I mean, here, who knew? $100 bills and $50 bills, fresh bills. It's that they will get you. That will get you anywhere. You don't have that many expenses, but if you want to get a cup of coffee in one of these wonderful new coffee houses, if you want to buy trinkets, you won't need very much money. But if you want to buy a beautiful miniature, you might need some cash. So prepare accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Great advice there. So, I mean, we've got so many other questions. In fact, in the same way that I was inundated with emails before the webinar even started, we're inundated with questions now. And I think a lot of these others that we've been asked are very specific to individuals. So I think to that point, it's worth contacting our call centre directly, and they'll be able to help answer.
Or you can get in touch with me. You can, buy my new book on Paris, or like it on Facebook, and I'm yours. I'll tell you anything you want to know about Iran. How's that for a deal?
Love it.
There's a lot of, the Iranians are great merchants, and I came from a Sicilian family where all we did was, trade. So I'm happy. No, this is a joke. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Well, I think there are going to be lots of questions. So if you don't get hold of Elaine,
call the call center.
Call the call centre 855-698-7979. So we did get asked one question about cost, which is obviously really important. So we've got 2 departures with space left, and that's it for 2016. So it's departure in November the 20th to December the 2nd, 2016, and December the 6th to December the 18th, 2016. Now, for that December departure, Elaine is going to be joining. So that's going to be fantastic. And as soon as we have the expert who accompanies our November departure confirmed, we'll let you know. But we haven't got a lot of space left on either of those departures. And as you can see here, it's limited to 20 guests as it is. So it's a really nice small group. Just to recap here, it's 13 days again, and each space is $7,195. There's a single supplement of $700. And in order to reduce the number of long bus rides, we have 2 flights that you'll take, and the internal air for those is $300. If there is a date that you're interested in and we don't have availability, then please call the call centre. They can add you to the wait list. I think it's unlikely that we're going to get space coming up in the next few months because we've got so many people that are booked on it. But if you'd like to be the first to hear about our 2017 dates, then do put your name down and we'll contact you as soon as they become available. So I think that just about wraps everything up for today. Before we end, and obviously thank you again, Elaine, for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Here.
I mean, my feeling is I really want to share this extraordinary country. I mean, that's the reason why I wrote the book I wrote called Persian Mirrors, that I just really wanted normal Americans who didn't know Iran firsthand to understand it through my lens. And we really do try to explain that this is an extraordinary country, an extraordinarily misunderstood country. And we try to give you your money's worth and have you all have a great time.
Well, we hope that you sign up and you join us, and maybe you'll see Elaine in December of next year. Or if you're in the New York area and you make it along to one of her book reviews and book readings, then you might meet her sooner as well. So anyway, thank you again, Elaine, for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you on one of our trips very shortly. Thank you very much, everyone.